The shrill ring of my phone pierced the silence of my office, making me jump. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach knot. Patricia! My mother-in-law's name on the screen was enough to send a wave of dread through me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself before answering. "Hello, Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Olivia, dear," her saccharine tone oozed through the speaker. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." I bit back a sarcastic response. Of course, she was interrupting. She always did. "What can I do for you?" I asked instead. "Well, I was just wondering if you'd picked up Connor's dry cleaning yet. You know how he likes his shirts pressed just so for work." I closed my eyes, counting to 5 in my head. "Patricia, I'm at work. Connor can pick up his own dry cleaning." "Oh, Olivia," she tutted. "A good wife takes care of these things. You wouldn't want Connor to look unprofessional, would you?" Before I could respond, my office door opened. Ethan, my colleague, poked his head in. He mouthed, "Meeting in 5, and I nodded gratefully. "I have to go, Patricia. I have a meeting." "Of course, dear. We'll talk later about the dry cleaning." I hung up, feeling a headache brewing behind my eyes. Ethan lingered in the doorway, concern etched on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Just the usual mother-in-law drama." Ethan shook his head. "I don't know how you put up with it. You're a saint, Olivia." If only he knew. If only anyone knew the half of what I dealt with daily. I gathered my notes for the meeting, trying to push thoughts of Patricia out of my mind. As we walked to the conference room, Ethan leaned in. "Hey, a bunch of us are going for drinks after work. Want to join?" The offer was tempting, a chance to unwind, to be around people who actually appreciated me, but I knew what awaited me at home if I was late. "I can't," I said, regret coloring my voice. "Connor's expecting me." Ethan's disappointment was palpable, but he nodded understandingly. The meeting dragged on, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about Connor, about how he'd react if he knew the truth about my job, about how much I really made. It was a secret I'd kept for years, partly out of habit, partly out of fear of Patricia's reaction. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Mom's coming over for dinner. Pick up some wine?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. Of course, Patricia was coming over. She always found a way to insert herself into our lives. I walked into our house, arms laden with groceries and the requested wine. The sound of Patricia's laughter drifted from the kitchen, along with the aroma of something burning. "Olivia, dear," Patricia called out. "We're in here. I'm just showing Connor how to properly cook a roast. The poor boy's been living off your attempts at cooking for far too long." I set the bags down, taking a moment to compose myself before entering the kitchen. Connor stood by the stove, looking lost, while Patricia fussed over a blackened piece of meat. "Hi, honey," Connor said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. "Mom's teaching me how to cook." I forced a smile. "That's great. I brought wine." Patricia clucked her tongue. "Oh, Olivia, you know Connor prefers beer with his dinner. Wine is so pretentious." I felt something snap inside me. The stress of the day, the constant criticisms, it all came to a head. "Actually," I said, my voice tight, "I brought the wine for me. I think I'm going to need it." The kitchen fell silent. Connor looked bewildered, while Patricia's eyes narrowed. I knew I'd pay for that comment later, but for now, I savored the small victory. As I poured myself a generous glass of wine, I couldn't help but wonder how long I could keep living like this. Something had to give. And soon. I never imagined my life could get worse, but fate has a twisted sense of humor. It was a crisp Sunday morning when Connor dropped the bombshell. "Honey," he said, his voice hesitant, "Mom's lease is up, and she's having trouble finding a new place. I told her she could stay with us for a while." The mug I was holding slipped from my grasp, shattering on the kitchen floor. Coffee splattered everywhere, but I barely noticed. "You did what?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Connor rushed to clean up the mess, avoiding my gaze. "It's just temporary, Olivia. She's family. We can't leave her without a place to stay." I stood there, frozen, as the reality of the situation sank in. Patricia, living with us. The thought made me physically ill. "When?" I managed to ask. "She's moving in today," Connor replied, still not meeting my eyes. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Connor practically sprinted to answer it, leaving me alone in the kitchen, surrounded by broken ceramic and spilled coffee. Patricia's voice floated through the house, saccharine sweet. "Oh, Connor, darling! Thank you so much for this. You're such a good son." I took a deep breath, plastered on a fake smile, and went to greet my new housemate. The next few days were a blur of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled insults. Patricia had taken over our guest room, but her presence seemed to fill every corner of the house. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Patricia sauntered into the kitchen. "Olivia, dear," she said, her tone dripping with false concern, "don't you think those pants are a bit tight? A woman your age should be more mindful of her figure." I gripped the knife I was using to chop vegetables tighter. "My pants are fine, Patricia," I said through gritted teeth. She tsked. "If you say so, dear. I just worry about Connor. Men can be so easily tempted when their wives let themselves go." Before I could retort, Connor walked in. "Something smells great," he said, oblivious to the tension. Patricia beamed at him. "I was just giving Olivia some fashion advice. You know how I worry about you two." Connor laughed. "Mom, you don't need to worry about us. Olivia and I are fine." I turned back to the stove, fighting back tears of frustration. We were not fine. We were far from fine. The next morning, I woke up to find Patricia rearranging our living room. She had moved all the furniture and was hanging new curtains. "Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "what are you doing?" She turned, a picture of innocence. "Oh, Olivia, I hope you don't mind. This room needed a woman's touch. It was so drab before." I closed my eyes, counting to 10. When I opened them, Patricia was still there, smiling that infuriating smile. "This is my house," I said quietly. "You can't just change things without asking." Patricia's smile faltered for a moment before returning full force. "Don't be silly, dear. This is Connor's house too, and he loves what I've done with the place." As if on cue, Connor walked in. "Wow, Mom, the room looks great." I felt something inside me snap. Without a word, I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house. I found myself in the parking lot at work, not even remembering the drive. Ethan was just arriving, and his face lit up when he saw me. "Olivia, what are you doing here on a Saturday?" I burst into tears, the stress of the past few days finally overwhelming me. Ethan rushed over, concern etched on his face. Hey, he said softly, pulling me into a hug. "What's wrong?" Through my sobs, I managed to explain the situation. Ethan listened, his face growing darker with each word. "Olivia," he said when I finished, "you can't keep living like this. It's not healthy." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "I know, but what can I do? She's Connor's mother." Ethan looked at me, his eyes intense. "You have options, Olivia, more than you realize." As I stood there in the parking lot, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe I did have options, and maybe it was time I started exploring them. The weeks that followed Patricia's move-in were a living nightmare. Every morning, I'd wake up hoping it had all been a bad dream, only to hear her shrill voice echoing through the house. Today was no different. "Olivia," Patricia called from downstairs, "Connor's shirts need ironing." I gritted my teeth, counting to 10 before responding. "I'm getting ready for work, Patricia. Connor can iron his own shirts." The sound of footsteps on the stairs made my heart race. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of disapproval. "A good wife takes care of her husband," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But I suppose that's too much to ask of you." Before I could retort, Connor appeared behind his mother. "It's okay, Mom. I can do it myself." Patricia turned to him, all sweetness and light. "Oh, honey, you shouldn't have to. That's what wives are for." I felt something snap inside me. "That's it," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I'm leaving for work. Don't wait up." I brushed past them both, ignoring Connor's confused calls. As I slammed the front door behind me, I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief to be away from Patricia's constant criticism, guilt for leaving Connor to deal with her alone. At work, I threw myself into my projects, desperate for any distraction. Ethan noticed my frazzled state and cornered me in the break room. "Olivia," he said gently, "you can't keep going on like this. You look exhausted." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know, Ethan, but what can I do? She's always there, always criticizing, always undermining me." Ethan's eyes hardened. "You need to stand up for yourself. Tell Connor how you feel." I laughed bitterly. "I've tried. He just doesn't see it. To him, she's just being helpful." As I spoke, my phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Mom wants to know what's for dinner. She says your cooking could use some work." I showed Ethan the message, my hands shaking with anger. He read it, his face darkening. "That's it," he said firmly. "You're coming home with me tonight. You need a break from all this." Part of me wanted to protest, to be the dutiful wife and go home. But a larger part, the part that was tired of being belittled and ignored, nodded in agreement. I texted Connor back. "Working late, order takeout." Ethan's apartment was small but cozy, a stark contrast to the tension-filled house I'd left behind. As we sat on his couch, nursing glasses of wine, I felt myself relax for the first time in weeks. "Thank you," I said softly. "I didn't realize how much I needed this." Ethan smiled, his eyes warm. "Anytime, Olivia. You deserve so much better than what you're getting at home." As the night wore on, I found myself opening up to Ethan in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. I told him about my secret career success, about the constant pressure from Patricia, about Connor's indifference. "Why do you stay?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle but probing. I stared into my wine glass, searching for an answer. I don't know anymore." Just then, my phone exploded with notifications, missed calls and texts from Connor and Patricia. I scrolled through them, my heart sinking with each message. "Where are you?" "Mom's worried sick." "How could you be so selfish?" "A good wife doesn't stay out all night." The last message made me see red. Without thinking, I dialed Connor's number. "Olivia?" he answered, his voice a mixture of relief and anger. "Where the hell are you?" "I'm safe," I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. "And I'm not coming home tonight." "What? But Mom," I cut him off. "No, Connor, not this time. I can't do this anymore. Your mother, your indifference, all of it. I'm done." As I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Ethan looked at me, a mixture of concern and admiration in his eyes. "What now?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling for the first time in years like I was in control of my own life. "Now," I said, "I start fighting back." The morning after my night at Ethan's, I returned home to face the music. As I stepped through the front door, the silence was deafening. Then, like a storm breaking, Patricia's voice rang out. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," she sneered from the living room. Connor sat beside her, his face a mask of disappointment and confusion. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Patricia scoffed. "About your shameful behavior? I should say so." "No," I replied, looking directly at Connor. "About us, about this situation." Connor shifted uncomfortably. "Olivia, can't we just forget about last night? Mom was worried sick." I felt my resolve hardening. "No, Connor, we can't just forget. This isn't working. Your mother living here, her constant criticism, your indifference, it's killing me." Patricia stood up, her eyes flashing. "How dare you, after everything we've done for you?" I laughed bitterly. "Done for me? You've done nothing but tear me down since the day I married Connor." The argument escalated quickly, voices rising, accusations flying. In the heat of the moment, I revealed my secret. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family," I shouted. "I'm the one who's been supporting us. My job, my success, it's all been for us." The room fell silent. Connor stared at me, shocked. Patricia's face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "What are you talking about?" Connor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before I could respond, a wave of dizziness hit me. The room started to spin, and I felt my knees buckle. The last thing I heard was Connor calling my name as everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors filling the room. Ethan was by my side, concern etched on his face. "What happened?" I croaked, my throat dry. "You collapsed at home," Ethan explained softly. "Exhaustion and severe stress," the doctors said. "You've been out for a day." I closed my eyes, the memories flooding back. "Connor?" Ethan's expression darkened. "He was here earlier, left when I arrived." A nurse entered, checking my vitals. "Mrs. Thompson, how are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I admitted. She nodded sympathetically. "That's to be expected. Your body's been under extreme stress. You need rest and a major lifestyle change." As she left, Ethan took my hand. "Olivia, this can't go on. You're killing yourself." I nodded, tears welling up. "I know, but what can I do? It's my home, my marriage." "Is it worth your life?" Ethan asked gently. Before I could answer, the door opened. Connor walked in, looking haggard. His eyes narrowed when he saw Ethan. "Could you give us a minute?" he asked, his tone clipped. Ethan squeezed my hand before leaving, throwing a concerned glance over his shoulder. Connor sat in the chair Ethan had vacated. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice a mixture of hurt and anger. "About your job, about how you were feeling." I sighed, feeling drained. "Would you have listened? Every time I tried to talk about your mother, you dismissed my concerns." Connor ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't realize." "That's the problem, Connor," I said softly. "You never realized. You never saw how much I was struggling." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "What do we do now?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years I saw clearly. I saw a man who, despite his good intentions, had consistently chosen his mother over his wife, a man who had stood by while I was belittled and broken down. "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but I know I can't go back to the way things were. I won't survive it." Connor nodded slowly, a look of resignation crossing his face. "And your colleague, Ethan?" "He's been a friend when I needed one," I said firmly. "Nothing more." As Connor left, promising to return later, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Things had to change, and they had to change now. After a week in the hospital, I returned home with a mix of dread and determination. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the hallway. "Welcome back," Connor said, emerging from the kitchen. His voice was strained, the tension between us palpable. I nodded, unsure of what to say. The revelation of my financial success still hung in the air, unaddressed. "Where's Patricia?" I asked, dreading the answer. Connor sighed. "In the guest room. She's not happy," I snorted. "When is she ever?" As if summoned by our conversation, Patricia appeared at the top of the stairs. Her eyes narrowed as she saw me. "So the prodigal daughter-in-law returns," she sneered. "I hope you're proud of yourself, worrying us all like that." I felt my blood begin to boil. Proud? Of being worked to the point of collapse? Of being constantly belittled and criticized in my own home? Patricia descended the stairs, her face a mask of indignation. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you." "Enough, Mom," Connor interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. I laughed bitterly. "Everything you've done for me? You mean moving in uninvited? Criticizing my every move, making me feel worthless in my own home?" Patricia's face reddened. "I've only ever tried to help. It's not my fault you're so sensitive. But then again, what can we expect from someone with your background?" The room fell silent. Connor's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Patricia smirked, sensing she'd struck a nerve. "Well, dear, it's no secret that you come from, shall we say, humble beginnings. No wonder you struggled to be a proper wife. You never had a good example, did you?" I felt as if I'd been slapped. "How dare you bring my parents into this?" "Mom, that's enough," Connor said, but Patricia was on a roll. "It's the truth, isn't it? Your poor, deceased parents. What would they think of you now? Lying about your job, neglecting your wifely duties." Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. "My parents would be proud of me," I shouted. "They taught me to work hard, to stand up for myself. They loved me unconditionally, something you clearly know nothing about." Patricia gasped, clutching her chest in mock offense. "Well, I never—" "No, you never." I cut her off. "You never cared about anyone but yourself. You've manipulated Connor his entire life, and now you're trying to do the same to me. But I won't let you. Not anymore." I turned to Connor, who stood frozen, his eyes darting between his mother and me. "Connor," I said, my voice shaking with emotion, "I can't do this anymore. I won't live like this. It's her or me." The silence that followed was deafening. Connor opened his mouth, then closed it again at a loss for words. Patricia recovered first. "Don't be ridiculous, Olivia. Connor would never choose you over his own mother." "Would you, darling?" Connor's lack of response was all the answer I needed. In that moment, I saw our entire marriage laid bare. Years of compromise, of putting everyone else's needs before my own, of slowly losing myself. "I see," I said quietly. The calm that washed over me was almost frightening. "Then I've made my decision." I walked past them both, heading for the stairs. Connor finally found his voice. "Olivia, wait, where are you going?" I paused, looking back at them. Patricia stood triumphant, while Connor looked lost and confused. "I'm packing my bags," I said. "I'm leaving." As I climbed the stairs, I heard Patricia's smug voice. Good riddance, you'll be back, begging for forgiveness. But I knew I wouldn't. For the first time in years, I felt free. The road ahead was uncertain, but anything was better than staying in this toxic environment. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I made a silent promise to myself. No more compromising my worth, no more letting others dictate my life. It was time to reclaim my independence, my self-respect, and my happiness. The Olivia who walked out of that house was not the same one who had entered it years ago. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next, alone if necessary. I stood in the lobby of the law firm, my heart pounding. This was it, the point of no return. I'd spent the last week in a hotel, ignoring Connor's calls and texts, steeling myself for this moment. As I rode the elevator to the 15th floor, I replayed the events that led me here, each floor bringing a new memory of hurt and disappointment. The receptionist ushered me into a plush office where a stern-faced woman sat behind an imposing desk. Mrs. Thompson, she greeted, gesturing for me to sit. I'm Margaret Winters. You're here to discuss divorce proceedings? I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. Yes, I can't continue in my marriage. As we discussed the details, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. This was the end of a chapter in my life, but also the beginning of a new one. Halfway through our meeting, my phone buzzed incessantly. Connor's name flashed on the screen. I silenced it, but the interruption had shaken me. Is everything all right? Margaret asked, her eyes sharp. I took a deep breath. Yes, it's just my husband. He doesn't know I'm here. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Thompson, are you sure about this? Divorce is a big step. I'm sure, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I can't live like this anymore. As we wrapped up the meeting, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. Olivia, where are you? Connor's here at the office looking for you. He seems really upset. My blood ran cold. How did Connor know where I worked? I'd always kept my job a secret from him and Patricia. I have to go, I told Margaret abruptly, gathering my things. I rushed out of the office, my mind racing. As the elevator descended, I tried to calm my nerves. What was Connor doing at my workplace? How much did he know? The doors opened, and I stepped into the lobby, only to come face to face with Connor and Patricia. Olivia, Connor said, his voice a mixture of relief and anger. What's going on? Where have you been? I stood my ground despite the urge to run. I told you, Connor, I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore. Patricia stepped forward, her eyes flashing. Don't be ridiculous, Olivia. You're coming home with us right now. No, I'm not, I said firmly. I'm done letting you control my life. Connor looked bewildered. Control your life? Olivia, what are you talking about? I laughed bitterly. You really don't see it, do you? How your mother has manipulated every aspect of our marriage, how you've always chosen her over me. That's not true, Connor protested weakly. Isn't it? I challenged. Then why are you here with her instead of coming to find me on your own? Connor fell silent, and I saw a flicker of realization in his eyes. Patricia, sensing she was losing control, changed tactics. Olivia, dear, we're just worried about you. You've been acting so strangely lately. Is it stress from work? Maybe you should take some time off. My work is not the problem, I said, my voice rising. My work is the only thing that's kept me sane. Do you want to know the truth, Connor? I'm the one who's been supporting us. My job, my success, it's all been for us, and you never even noticed. The lobby fell silent. Connor's face paled, while Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. What do you mean? Connor stammered. I took a deep breath, years of pent-up frustration pouring out. I mean that while you've been letting your mother run our lives, I've been working my way up in my career. I'm a senior executive now, Connor. I make 3 times what you do. And I've kept it a secret because I knew Patricia would find a way to use it against me, to make me feel small and insignificant like she always does. Patricia's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little... No, I cut her off. I'm done being grateful for your abuse. I'm done pretending everything is fine when it's not. I'm filing for divorce, Connor. It's over. As I turned to leave, Connor grabbed my arm. Olivia, please. We can work this out. I had no idea. I pulled away, tears stinging my eyes. That's the problem, Connor. You never had any idea, and now it's too late. I walked out of the lobby, leaving Connor and Patricia standing there, shocked and silent. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt free. The days following my confrontation with Connor and Patricia were a blur of legal meetings and emotional upheaval. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. Ethan had been a rock, offering support without pushing for more. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone rang. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Olivia. Her voice was uncharacteristically soft. We need to talk, please. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe. As I walked in, I saw her sitting alone, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I nodded, wary. What do you want, Patricia? She took a deep breath. I want you to reconsider the divorce. Connor is devastated. I made mistakes, but surely we can work this out. I laughed bitterly. Work it out? After years of your manipulation and Connor's indifference? It's too late for that. Patricia's eyes flashed with a familiar anger, but she quickly composed herself. Olivia, be reasonable. Think about what you're giving up. The stability, the family. The abuse? I cut in. The constant criticism? The feeling of never being good enough? I was trying to help, Patricia protested. I only wanted what was best for Connor, for both of you. I shook my head. No, Patricia, you wanted control. You wanted to keep Connor dependent on you and me in my place. Patricia's facade cracked. And what's so wrong with that? I raised Connor. I know what's best for him. You're just some girl who wormed her way into his life. I'm his wife, I snapped, my voice rising. Or at least, I was. I loved him, supported him, built a life with him, and you couldn't stand it. Patricia leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. Listen to me, Olivia. You don't understand what you're doing. Connor, he's not as strong as you think. He needs me. He needs us. Suddenly, I understood. This isn't about Connor at all, is it? It's about you. You're afraid of losing the lifestyle my income provides. Patricia's face paled. That's not true. I just want what's best for my son. No, I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. You want what's best for you. You've always used Connor as an excuse to control everything around you, but it ends now. I stood up, ready to leave, but Patricia grabbed my arm. You can't do this. You have no idea what you're giving up. The money, the status. I pulled away, my voice steady. I earned that money, Patricia. I built that status. And I did it all while you and Connor belittled and ignored me. I don't need either of you to be successful. Patricia's desperation turned to anger. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By abandoning my son? The cafe fell silent, all eyes on us. I felt a lifetime of pent-up emotions bubbling to the surface. Done for me? I said, my voice dangerously low. You've done nothing but tear me down since the day I married Connor. You've criticized my cooking, my housekeeping, my career. You've manipulated Connor against me at every turn. And now you have the audacity to act like I owe you something? Patricia stood up, her face red with rage. You'll regret this, Olivia. You think you can just walk away? I'll make sure you lose everything in this divorce. Everything. I laughed, a sound that surprised even me. Go ahead and try, Patricia. I'm not afraid of you anymore. As I turned to leave, Patricia called out one last time. He'll never let you go, you know. Connor will fight this divorce every step of the way. I paused at the door, looking back at the woman who had made my life hell for so long. Then let him fight. I'm done being the victim in this story. Walking out of that cafe, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead would be difficult, I knew that. But for the first time, I was ready to face it on my own terms. No more compromises, no more sacrifices. It was time to reclaim my life, whatever the cost. 6 months after my confrontation with Patricia, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and the promise of a fresh start. The divorce had been finalized last week, and despite Connor's initial threats, it had gone smoother than I'd expected. My financial success had been my ace in the hole, leaving Patricia and Connor with no leverage. As I unpacked, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. Hey, I answered, a smile in my voice. How's the unpacking going? He asked. Slowly but surely, I replied. Want to come over and help? There was a pause. Actually, I'm already outside your building. I brought dinner. My heart skipped a beat. Ethan had been a constant support throughout the divorce, but we'd kept things strictly platonic. Until now. I buzzed him up, suddenly nervous. As I opened the door, I saw Ethan standing there, holding takeout bags and wearing a hesitant smile. "I hope this is okay," he said. I pulled him into a hug. "It's more than okay." As we ate, sitting on boxes because I hadn't unpacked my furniture yet, Ethan filled me in on the office gossip. Apparently, my divorce and subsequent promotion had caused quite a stir. "Oh, and you'll never guess who I saw today," Ethan said, his tone cautious. I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Connor and Patricia. They were at the bank, looking pretty stressed." I felt a twinge of something. Not regret exactly, but a complex mix of emotions. How did they look? Ethan hesitated. Not great. Connor looked like he hadn't slept in days, and Patricia, well, she's definitely not living the high life anymore. I nodded, processing this information. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, but another part felt an unexpected pang of sadness. "Olivia," Ethan said softly, "are you okay?" I took a deep breath. "You know what? I really am. For the first time in years, I feel free." Ethan reached out, taking my hand. "You deserve to be happy, Olivia. You've been through so much." As I looked into his eyes, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. But before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Connor. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" Olivia, Connor's voice was strained. I need your help." I closed my eyes, steeling myself. "What is it, Connor?" "It's Mom. She's not doing well. The stress of everything, it's taken a toll on her health. We can't afford her medical bills, and I don't know what to do." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Anger at the audacity of him asking for help after everything, pity for Patricia's situation, and a strange sense of power, knowing I held their fate in my hands. "Connor," I said, my voice steady, "I'm sorry about Patricia's health, but I can't help you, not anymore." "But Olivia?" "No, Connor, you and Patricia made your choices. Now you have to live with them, just like I had to live with the consequences of your actions for years." There was a long silence. Then, "I understand. I'm sorry, Olivia, for everything." As I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The last tie to my old life had been severed. Ethan was watching me, concern etched on his face. "Everything okay?" I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "Yes, everything is finally okay." I stood up, pulling Ethan with me. "Come on, help me unpack these boxes. I think it's time to start filling this new life with some happy memories." As we worked side by side, laughing and sharing stories, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been long and painful, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and truly free. Patricia and Connor's downfall wasn't a victory to celebrate, but a reminder of the importance of independence and self-respect. And as I looked at Ethan, I saw the possibility of a future filled with mutual respect and genuine love. This was my new chapter, my fresh start. And for the first time in years, I was excited about what the future held. The woman who had entered that toxic marriage years ago was gone. In her place stood a stronger, more confident Olivia, ready to face whatever life threw her way. As night fell and the last box was unpacked, I stood at my window, looking out at the city lights. I was no longer Connor's wife or Patricia's daughter-in-law. I was just Olivia. And that, I realized, was more than enough. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Mark, my husband of 30 years, sat across from me, his eyes glued to the TV, ignoring my presence as usual. I sat there, lost in my thoughts, feeling the weight of years of unspoken grievances and suppressed anger. I had reached my limit. "Did you finish moving?" Mark's voice, tinged with his usual condescension, pierced the silence. I didn't look at him as I replied, "I'm leaving, Mark." My voice was calm, but inside a storm was raging. Mark scoffed, "Oh, really? And where will you go, Anna? You can't survive without me." His words stung, but they also fueled my resolve. For too long I had endured his dismissive attitude and his mother's incessant meddling. It was time to reclaim my life. "I'll manage," I said, standing up. I felt empowered despite the fear and uncertainty that lay ahead. His mother, who had been living with us for the past year, walked in, her eyes narrowing as she saw my packed bags. "Running away, are we?" she sneered. "I knew you didn't have the spine to handle this family." Ignoring her, I grabbed my bags and headed towards the door. Mark didn't move to stop me. Instead, he called out, "You'll be back. You need us." As I stepped out of the house, I felt a sense of liberation. The cool evening breeze felt like a balm to my suffocated soul. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. For 30 years, I had played the dutiful wife to Mark, a man who saw me more as a convenience than a partner. Our son Alex was the only light in my life, but even he couldn't fill the growing void in my heart. Mark's mother, with her constant criticisms and manipulations, only added to the toxicity of our home. I found a small apartment, modest but peaceful. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe and think without judgment. In the following days, I ignored the barrage of calls and messages from Mark and his mother. They fluctuated between pleading and threats, but I was done listening. My coworkers at the library, where I had worked part-time for years, were supportive. They had seen the changes in me, the gradual loss of my spirit. Now, they witnessed my rebirth. One evening, as I was settling into my new routine, my phone rang. It was Alex. "Mom, are you okay?" His voice was laced with concern. "I am, Alex. Better than I've been in years," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm proud of you, Mom. Dad and Grandma, they're not taking it well. Dad's been drinking, and Grandma won't stop talking about how you've abandoned them." A pang of guilt hit me, but I pushed it away. "They'll manage, Alex. They need to learn to respect others." Alex was silent for a moment. "I'm glad you're finally thinking about yourself, Mom. Let me know if you need anything." As I hung up the phone, I realized this was just the beginning. Mark and his mother had underestimated me for years. It was time to show them that I was no longer the woman they thought they could control. My journey of self-discovery and revenge had just begun. In my small apartment, surrounded by the few belongings I had taken with me, I reflected on the past 30 years with Mark. Our marriage, once filled with promise, had slowly disintegrated into a shadow of what it could have been. It all started blissfully. Mark was charming and attentive, and we were young, full of dreams. But as the years passed, the charm faded, revealing a man more interested in his own needs than those of his family. When Alex was born, I thought it would bring us closer, but it only highlighted our differences. Mark's idea of parenting was providing financially, leaving the emotional nurturing to me. His mother, Eleanor, always hovered in the background, her criticism of my parenting a constant drone. "Anna, you're coddling the boy too much," Eleanor would say. "Mark never needed all this fuss." I endured her jibes, focusing on Alex, who grew up to be a thoughtful and independent young man, despite the tension at home. The turning point came when Eleanor moved in with us. Mark didn't even discuss it with me. I just came home one day to find her bags in the hallway. "My house is too lonely," she had said, a manipulative glint in her eye. Living with Eleanor was suffocating. She criticized everything from my cooking to the way I dressed. "Mark could have done so much better," she would often say within my earshot. But what truly broke me was discovering Mark's betrayal. I stumbled upon bank statements one day, revealing large withdrawals from our joint account, money used to fund Eleanor's gambling habit and Mark's secret indulgences. Confronting them led to heated arguments, with Mark always siding with his mother. "She's my mother, Anna. She needs this to cope with her loneliness," he would argue, dismissive of my concerns. The final straw came when I overheard a conversation between them, plotting to take control of the finances completely, reducing me to nothing but an occupant in their house. I knew then that I couldn't live in that shadow any longer. The day I left, I promised myself that they would one day understand the pain they had caused. My plan was simple yet effective. I would hit them where it hurt the most, their pride and their finances. I started by legally separating our finances, a move that shocked Mark. "What do you think you're doing?" he had yelled over the phone. "Protecting myself, something I should have done years ago," I replied, my voice calm but firm. Eleanor's reaction was even more dramatic. "You ungrateful wretch! After everything we've done for you," she screeched when she found out. But I was unmoved. The years of submission were over. I was playing by my own rules now, and this was just the beginning of their karma. The weeks following my financial independence were tumultuous. Mark and Eleanor were furious, their true natures fully exposed in their anger. I received countless calls, each more venomous than the last. "You think you're clever, Anna?" Mark hissed during one call. "You're nothing without me. You'll come crawling back." "I won't, Mark. I'm done being your puppet," I replied, my newfound strength bolstering my words. Eleanor was even more vitriolic. You'll regret this, Anna. You've ruined our family. There was no family to ruin, Eleanor. It was an illusion, I shot back. Despite their threats, I felt liberated. The fear that once controlled me had evaporated, replaced by a resolute desire for justice. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. I started by reaching out to old friends and acquaintances, sharing my story. The truth about Mark and Eleanor's manipulations and financial deceit quickly spread, tarnishing their reputations. Mark, who prided himself on his social standing, was appalled. "How could you do this to me?" he demanded during a rare face-to-face encounter. "You did this to yourself," I replied calmly. "I'm just shedding light on it." Eleanor, faced with the community's judgment, was equally distraught. "You've turned everyone against us. This is war, Anna." But I was no longer intimidated by her. "No, Eleanor, this is justice." I watched as their world crumbled. Mark's friends began to distance themselves, wary of his tarnished image. Eleanor's social circle, once a source of her pride, dwindled as the truth about her gambling and manipulation spread. But I didn't stop there. I knew their financial instability was their weakest point. With the help of a lawyer, I began the process of claiming my share of our joint assets, ensuring that Eleanor's gambling debts were exposed and Mark's mismanagement of our finances was brought to light. The court proceedings were grueling, but I stood my ground. Mark and Eleanor's attempts to discredit me fell flat, their lies and deceit no match for the truth. As the judge ruled in my favor, granting me a significant portion of our assets, I saw the defeat in Mark and Eleanor's eyes. It was more than just a legal victory. It was a moral one. "You've destroyed us, Anna," Mark said, a shadow of his former arrogant self. "No, Mark, you destroyed us long ago. I'm just picking up the pieces," I replied. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I looked forward to the future, free from the chains of my past. Mark and Eleanor's downfall was the first step in my journey of reclaiming my life, and I was ready for whatever came next. The aftermath of the court ruling was a whirlwind. With my rightful share of the assets, I began building a life free from Mark and Eleanor's shadow. Their reactions, however, were a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You can't do this to us, Anna," Mark exclaimed over the phone one evening, his voice laced with desperation. "I've done nothing but take back what's mine," I replied firmly. "You should have thought about the consequences before you betrayed me." Eleanor's response was more underhanded. She tried to rally family members against me, painting herself as a victim. But her attempts were futile. The truth about her had spread too far. "Anna, you're tearing this family apart," she accused during a chance encounter at the grocery store. "This family was broken long before I left," I countered, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I relished the freedom of living on my own terms. I changed my phone number, cutting off their direct line of harassment. I also started volunteering at a local shelter, finding solace in helping others who had faced similar struggles. But my quest for justice wasn't over. I learned that Eleanor was planning to contest the court's decision, still clinging to the hope of reclaiming the money for her gambling habits. "You won't get away with this, Anna. I'll make sure of it," she threatened in a message relayed through a relative. In response, I fortified my legal defenses, prepared to counter any move she made. I was no longer the woman who shied away from confrontation. I was a fighter, standing up for what was rightfully mine. Mark, meanwhile, was crumbling under the pressure. His once pristine image was now tarnished, and his career suffered as a result. The friends and connections he valued so much were now distancing themselves, unwilling to associate with a man caught in scandal. "You've ruined me, Anna," he lamented during a rare moment of reflection. "You ruined yourself, Mark. I just exposed the truth," I replied. As the weeks turned into months, I watched as their once secure world disintegrated. Eleanor's attempt to contest the court's decision failed miserably, leaving her financially and socially bankrupt. Mark's career continued its downward spiral, his reputation irreparably damaged. But despite their downfall, I felt no joy in their suffering. It was a necessary step in my journey, but it was not the end. I had reclaimed my independence and my dignity, but I was still healing from years of neglect and emotional abuse. As I continued to rebuild my life, I focused on finding peace and happiness within myself. I had emerged from the shadows of my past, stronger and more resilient. My story was not one of revenge, but of emancipation, a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Several months had passed since the court's decision, and the ripples of my actions were still felt. Mark and Eleanor, now estranged from most of their acquaintances, were living a shadow of their former lives. One day, I received an unexpected visit from Alex. He looked troubled, his usually bright eyes clouded with concern. "Mom, I just came from seeing Dad and Grandma," he began, his voice heavy. They're not doing well." I offered him a seat and a warm cup of tea. "Tell me what happened, Alex." He sighed deeply before continuing. "Dad's been let go from his job, his drinking, it's gotten worse. And Grandma, she's lost everything to gambling. They're selling the house." I listened, my heart aching for Alex. Despite everything, they were still his family. "Mom, did we go too far?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, we stood up for what's right. They made their choices," I replied, my voice tinged with sadness. The news of their misfortune didn't bring me joy. Instead, it was a somber reminder of the consequences of a life lived without integrity and respect for others. The following weeks were filled with whispers and rumors. Mark and Eleanor's house, once a symbol of their success, was now on the market. Their fall from grace was complete. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Mark had tried to find work, but his reputation preceded him. Eleanor, meanwhile, had become a pariah in her social circles, her gambling addiction now public knowledge. One evening, while I was out for a walk, I saw Mark. He was a shadow of the man he once was, his posture slumped, his eyes hollow. Our paths crossed, and for a moment we stood there in silence. "Anna, he began, his voice cracking. "There's nothing to say, Mark," I interrupted. "You chose your path." He nodded slowly, a resigned look in his eyes. "I never thought it would come to this," he murmured. As I walked away, leaving Mark behind, I felt a sense of closure. The man who had once held so much power over me was now just a stranger with a broken past. Eleanor, too, faded into obscurity. Her once lively demeanor was now subdued, the realities of her actions finally catching up to her. As the chapter of Mark and Eleanor closed, I realized that my journey was about more than revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and finding peace. I had stood up to my oppressors, not for vengeance, but for justice and self-respect. The experience had taught me the power of resilience and the importance of standing up for oneself. As I continued to build my new life, I did so with a newfound strength and a heart ready to embrace the future. Months turned into a year since the upheaval of my life began. In this time, my journey of self-reinvention continued, with each day bringing new strengths and realizations. The downfall of Mark and Eleanor was not my endgame. It was merely a byproduct of my pursuit for justice and respect. One crisp autumn afternoon, I sat in my cozy living room, the warm sunlight streaming through the window, reflecting on the changes. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Alex. "Mom, I wanted to tell you something," Alex said, his voice brimming with excitement. "Sarah and I are getting married, and we'd love for you to help us with the planning." Joy surged through me. "That's wonderful news, Alex. Of course I'd love to help." Our conversation was filled with laughter and plans for the future, a stark contrast to the calls filled with distress and despair from the past. A few days later, while out for my regular walk, I encountered Eleanor. She seemed smaller, diminished somehow. Our eyes met, and there was a brief flicker of something, regret perhaps, or realization in hers. "Anna," she began, her voice quivering. I'm sorry." The apology, unexpected and late, caught me off guard. "Eleanor, your actions brought you here. I hope you find some peace." As I walked away, leaving Eleanor standing alone, I realized the full extent of my transformation. I no longer harbored anger or resentment. I had moved beyond the need for revenge. The wedding planning with Alex and Sarah was a joyful affair. It was during these moments, surrounded by love and hope, that I truly appreciated the beauty of moving forward. The day of the wedding arrived, a beautiful ceremony filled with laughter and tears of joy. Watching Alex and Sarah, so full of love and promise, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Despite the challenges, we had emerged stronger. In my toast, I said, "Life brings many challenges, but it's how we face them that defines us." Today, we celebrate love, resilience, and new beginnings. As the evening drew to a close, I looked around at the happy faces, feeling content. I had not only survived, I had thrived. In the years that followed, Mark and Eleanor remained distant memories. I heard through the grapevine that they had moved away, each carrying their own burdens. My life, once overshadowed by their presence, was now my own. I found fulfillment in my work, joy in my role as a mother and friend, and peace in my solitary moments. As I sat in my garden one sunny afternoon watching the flowers bloom, I realized this was what true freedom felt like. My journey had been long and fraught with obstacles, but it led me to a place of contentment and strength. The end of my marriage was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I was the author of my own life, and in this new chapter I found happiness, peace, and a sense of self that no one could ever take away.